Welcome to the Base Path Podcast, brought to you by New England Baseball Journal. I'm your host, Dan Guttenplan. Today's guest is Jim Bretz, a scouting supervisor for the Detroit Tigers. He has been in the world of baseball for his entire life. He's a former coach at Hartford and UNC Charlotte. He's also been a scout with the San Diego Padres and Cleveland Indians. Jim's going to join us today to kick off the college baseball season, which will start today, Friday, on Valentine's Day. Right now, he's down in Virginia at a hotel on his way down to catch some college baseball. Jim, thanks so much for joining the podcast.
Thank you very much, Dan. Appreciate it. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so what is the schedule for this weekend? Which teams are you scouting? And if you could kind of give us an overview, I know you're kind of in charge of the Northeast region. Is it guys, obviously everybody's down south now. What's your weekend going to look like?
Well, to start, I am in charge of all of New England, of course, New York, New Jersey, and also Eastern Canada. So there's a lot of baseball to be seen. Yeah, we start this weekend. So this will go, from this weekend all the way really through the draft in July, and really honestly beyond that. It never stops. It's a 12-month-a-year job. We'll be locking in. We'll be first start. Our initial starts in North Carolina. There are, five or six New England teams that are actually playing in the Carolinas. Northeastern is at Charlotte. I think Bryant is at Davidson. So there's a bunch more. St. Bonaventure, which I'm going to start with, is at Gardner Webb in beautiful Boiling Springs, North Carolina. So we'll start there, and then we'll go from there. The weather's kind of wreaking havoc right now with some of the weekend. So, it's we'll see what happens, and we'll play through it just like we always do.
Yeah, that's all we can do this time of year. Yeah, I wanted to ask, so you said you might have an opportunity to see Northeastern. I was trying to think of who would be the most dialed into the Northeast baseball scene and it's difficult because if you go with a coach of a team that they've really only seen their own team, you probably got a chance to see a lot of these teams from the fall. What were, when they're playing fall ball or even inter-squad stuff, what were some of your big takeaways from the fall from a scouting perspective?
Well, that's our job, is to see as many as we can. You try to shove in as many teams in a short amount of time that you can. Most of these teams, I mean, the fall really is kind of the best time of year to play. We always say that we played this season at the wrong time of year. I mean, now we're dealing with weather and snow and sleet and rain and everything now. In the fall, it was gorgeous. So, but to take away, I mean, yes, you try to see the premier prospects in the fall. You try to get a lock on what they may be. In the process of seeing those premier guys, you end up finding guys that maybe weren't on the radar before. And that's the great thing about what we do as scouts in the Northeast. Guys in the Northeast are normally late bloomers anyway. So it's awesome to go and focus on a kid or two kids at a school. Let's use Northeastern, for example, and then all of a sudden two more pop up, and you say, hey, wait a minute, he needs to be on my list to be seen. So, and that happens with a multitude of teams in the Northeast, and New England in particular, because look, it's probably the most difficult area to scout in the country. Short window to see them, late bloomers. And guys guys are a strong work ethic with having to go through a lot in our area. We all know we have weather to deal with. We have a lot of things we have to deal with up there, which makes it very challenging. But, those guys, it ends up working out for those guys when they get into a minor league situation because they're used to battling. They're used to scrapping. And that's what's great about guys in New England, about guys in the Northeast, is what kind of product you're getting. You can sell them to your staffs because that they're going to represent well. They're going to represent themselves. They're going to scrap. And that's what the minor leagues is. It's a grind. And that's what they do up here. They grind it out. And that's what makes scouting the Northeast and scouting New England so darn, attractive for me anyway.
Yeah. And Northeastern, under Coach Glavin has really kind of developed into a a mainstay in terms of producing some high-end talent. They've been to the regionals, I think 4 of the last 5 years, maybe. And they've got some good guys this year. Cam Maldonado, he had a really good summer on the Cape last year. His freshman year, he was a freshman All-America selection. Avon Cabral is the same way. He went to St. Mary's High School in Lynn, and then he was a freshman All-America selection too. How did those guys look in the fall? What are you kind of expecting from them this spring?
Well, they look good in the fall. Mike traditionally has a good club every year. They will play at the top of the league every year. Mike and his staff do an outstanding job with that place. He recruits well. They're always going to be in the mix simply because he recruits well. And Cam has been a name for a couple years now. Cabral has been a guy that popped up a couple years ago that, you look at him and you say, okay, maybe not the sexiest guy in the world when you watch him pitch, but shoot, look at the numbers on him. And he just simply goes out and performs. And that's what professional baseball is performance. We don't care how you get it done, just get it done and win baseball games. So, those are just 2 examples at Northeastern. He'll have guys that pop up. There'll be guys by the time July rolls around and the draft rolls around. He'll have other guys on the list too. He always does, as will some of the other schools in the Northeast. That it happens every single year. We go in thinking, okay, it's this guy, and then next thing you look at your list and now you've got 15 guys from New England, and you say, well, shoot, they weren't on the radar when we started, but that's New England baseball. And it doesn't have to be from D1, just D1s either. You're going to find us end up going to some of the D2s and maybe even the D3s to see these guys, because that's the beauty of baseball in our area. They pop up, out of nowhere, and it just goes to show you that players come from everywhere. You just have to go find them and dig them up.
Yeah, you're right. We have seen, Southern New Hampshire University has produced some guys, Franklin Pierce, and even, the D3s, have been Wheaton, some of those schools have also produced some pro players. Yeah. UConn is a team that is probably, traditionally our top team from New England, in terms of ranking, national rankings and the ability to kind of make some noise once you go into the national tour, the regionals and, beyond. What does their team look like this year? I know in the last few years, they've taken on a lot of transfers and, they still are recruiting a lot of high school guys in the Connecticut region. What do you expect from UConn this spring?
Well, that's another place there that they just continue to do it right. They win baseball games every single year. Jimmy Penders and his staff, Josh McDonald and Jeff Horgan and all those guys, Pedeswa, they just do it the right way. And the portal has changed baseball a lot. The portal's changed college athletics a lot. They do a good job of going out and getting pieces. They'll get a kid, a pitcher that they need from California or a kid from the Midwest to come in there, and next thing you know, we don't know anything about him, and next thing you know, he's putting up numbers. They're putting up numbers, and they're winning baseball games. And they'll go out just like they always do, and they'll win baseball games. 30, 35 games a year, playing the top of the Big East, and probably win it. They're always a factor there. And then they'll go into a regional and they'll win the first round of the regional. And, then all of a sudden everybody wakes up and says, well, wait a minute, who is this UConn team? Well, they're the same team they were when they started on day one. They're scrappy, they're blue collar. Jimmy and his staff, they emit that type of feel, and their players play hard. And that's the one thing that we know when we go scout them is we're going to get fundamentally sound baseball team, pitching staff that throws strikes. They're going to play small ball very well. And they're going to win baseball games. And so, we know we can sell that program every year because they're doing all the things that you want kids to do when they enter professional baseball. It's an easy transition for these schools, for UConn, Northeastern, any of these schools in our area. that do it the right way, it's an easy transition for their players into pro ball because they're already used to the grind. They're already used to playing it fundamentally sound, and now all they just need to be developed in a pro sense. That's all. So it's, UConn's going to be one of our top schools to see again this year, as they always are. I know they're on my list, and I know they've got a hellacious road trip. Their schedule is Puerto Rico. They start in Puerto Rico this weekend, and then I think they're doing a Florida thing, and then probably out west again, as they normally do. And that's the other thing about UConn is the world sees them because they get out on the road for the first 4 or 5 weeks, and the West Coast sees them, and Puerto Rico will see them, and so we have a lot of bosses, a lot of cross-checkers, and that will see them nationally, and it helps their appeal.
Yeah. You couldn't finagle a trip down to Puerto Rico this weekend? You said you're sitting in snow.
No, that's too cushy for me. It's too warm for me down there.
Yeah. So yeah, UConn, they've got a couple guys. Ryan Daniels, I like him a lot. He was a great infielder at the high school level, and he was kind of had a injury plagued season last year. But Ian Brown, also a good starting pitcher, who kind of had a down year last year and could come back and make some noise in this year's draft. What about, I want to ask you about BC. That they had a year last year. So Coach Gambino ended up taking the Penn State job after the 2023 season, when they had a great year that year, and ended up making some noise and almost made it out of the NCAA regional, almost hosted an NCAA regional that year. They didn't win as many games last year, weren't quite as competitive. Now it's the Power Four conferences, and the ACC is always loaded. How do you think that program is doing in the year 2 now under Coach Interdonato?
Well, BC is going to be fine. Okay. When Coach Interdonato came in, he basically had to start over. Mike did a fantastic job at BC. And then he moved on to Penn State, where he's going to do a fantastic job there too. But when Todd came in, he had to get his feet wet, and, trying to find out exactly what New England baseball and Northeastern baseball is all about. It's a different dynamic than him coming from Wofford, okay, where he won a lot of games. So I don't worry about the program. There is a transition period. There's going to be there is a learning curve for those kids, and the coaching staff too. Just the style of baseball, the league. Of course, as we know, the ACC is not easy. It's a gauntlet all the way through. And Todd is trying to adjust to that gauntlet and get his players in recruiting wise that he wants, that fit his style. He's doing it now, and he will. So I don't worry about that, but there is a learning curve, and you got to give those kids time to get used to his style, the kind of baseball he likes to play. And he in turn has to get used to what he has and what he has coming in. So, I would just be wary of them, as far as they're going to play hard. I know they're going to play hard for sure, because he won't see it any other way. I saw them this fall, and I'm very encouraged by what I saw this fall, albeit it had most of it being indoors. And I think we're all tired of bubble ball. But the BC program, listen, pay attention to it, give it some time. It's going to be okay. You just got to give them, both the kids and Todd and his staff, time to get acclimated to what they want to do with that program. It's still going to be it's still a solid program, and it's a good product to watch. And I encourage people to actually go to Chestnut Hill and go see those guys play.
Yeah, I remember talking to Coach Gambino a couple of years ago, and he said, or he felt like he was getting, among the New England schools, he was getting the top talent in New England at the time, which they have great facilities, and they're in the ACC, and they have the money to offer and all that stuff. From your perspective now, like where do you see the top prospects? And you have some experience with the area code games and East Coast Pro Showcase and some of those types of things. Where do you see the top high school prospects from New England going, and has it changed because of the transfer portal?
It has changed a little bit. It's tough up here. It's tough in the New England area because, listen, we all know kids like bells and whistles. Kids want big and better. They're always looking to be big and better. That's not always the answer all the time. You know, a lot of our kids end up going, you know, whether it's to a Power Five down south or the SEC or ACC or even out west. I think what's important for them to understand is you need to go where you can play, because it doesn't do you any good. You go to a Power Five and you're sitting on at the end of the bench for 3 years. That's no fun. It doesn't matter how much how large the bells and whistles are, the stadium you play in, or the crowd you see, because they're not seeing you if you're sitting in the end of the dugout. Okay, I think that. And because of the portal, again, we've said that the portal changes things. There's a short leash on players now. If you don't produce, they're going to be looking for somebody to fill your shoes, because coaches, especially in Power Fives, are hired to win baseball games. They're not hired to babysit you for 3-4 years or sit there and basically let you develop for 3 years. That's not the way it works nowadays. And that's what makes college baseball so hard for a lot of coaches now is you recruit, you put your efforts into a kid, you bring him in, you think, okay, I can develop this kid, so by year 3 he's going to be a stud. Well, guess what? You don't have year 3 anymore. It's not the way it works. Players in our area, I mean, you know, we've got high school players. We've got good high school players. We've just got to make sure that that we are able to sell them on the fact that, look, a mid-major in Massachusetts or Rhode Island or Connecticut is not a bad thing if you're going to play. If they, you know, you can't become a prospect, especially a professional prospect, if you're not on the field. So, you know, and you try to tell them that, you know, without telling them what to do, but they seriously need to start thinking about that kind of stuff. You know, we've got players that are pretty good in New England, and you know, it's just a matter of whether they stick around or not. But you know, they're fun to go see in high school. And that's the double-edged sword is they're really good, and you want to be really good, but the coaches down south, they're not dumb either. They're coming up, and the coaches are coming out, and they figured it out. They figured out that our guys are scrappers. They work. If you've got tools, but you got to have tools, and they're talented. So they're tapping into this market up in our area, and it kind of stinks for some of the schools in our area. Because we end up losing them. They come from all over. They're everywhere in the Northeast. Sometimes they don't get the credit they deserve. But you go dig them up, and you'll find a good crop of high school players in New England.
Yeah. I wanted to ask about the transfer portal. One other thing with it, because it seems like, you know, everybody has a different story of why they transferred. Maybe somebody sat the bench their freshman year and decided, you know, hey, I'm not going to play here for a few more years. I need to go somewhere, like you said, where I'm getting on the field and I'm showing what I can do. It might be, you know, guys transfer for a graduate year sometimes, or, you know, maybe there was a red shirt season. They want to go get a graduate degree or something like that. In the eyes of pro scouts, do you view it ever as a negative, like, hey, this guy, rather than put his head down and work hard and try to stay where he was and earn a starting job, he transferred? That doesn't show me, you know, resilience or something. Would you ever ding somebody for being a transfer?
I don't think so. Not now, because guys transfer for different reasons. I mean, there's each guy is different. You can't lump them all into the same mold. Some guys transfer. For instance, the Ivy League schools do not allow a 5th year. So those kids have no choice but to transfer if they want another year. If they want a grad year, they have no choice but. And we've had some good ones. We've had some really good ones that are from Ivy League schools in our area that went and went to Texas A&M or went to Vanderbilt and got another year. And made good with that year, played, became prospects, signed either as in the draft or as a non-drafted free agent out, after the year was over with. So you can't blame those guys. Some guys transfer. I mean, you're seeing the guys now that have transferred 2 and 3 times. I mean, guys that transfer out of a mid-major in New England or the Northeast go to what they consider a bigger, better school and end up transferring back. So, we as scouts, yes, we have to ask the questions. We have to find out why they transferred. We have to find out the dynamics behind it. But you can't always hold it against them. You scout them all just the same as you would scout anybody else. The other information that you build or that you gain through the transfers, yeah, you kind of lock that away in inside and see, okay, could this affect him in his development? Is this a red flag come development time? And then you go from there. But you try to go on a year-to-year basis. Yes, you gather the information on the transfer, but still you're locked in on the tools. That's what we're scouting, are the tools. And a little bit of the makeup comes into play too. But so yeah, the portal has changed college athletics, across the board in every sport. But you can't you can't ding a guy because he makes a situation better for himself or his family because he transferred. I mean, if it's more lucrative for him to transfer and he gets a chance to play, by all means, he should probably do that.
Right. Yeah, because he might not even be on your radar otherwise,
right.
If he stayed.
Correct. But I think you're also finding guys, that thought the grass was greener when they transferred, found out it wasn't, and ended up transferring back, and then they ended up being a guy again. So, right. We've seen that too. So it's you see a lot of different sides of the transfer portal, and listen. I was a college coach for 12 years. I don't think I could do it. I don't. In today's world, I don't think I could go back and do it because I was too much into recruiting a guy and knowing he was going to be with me so I could develop him for the next 3-4 years. And, I'm probably too old to go back and do something like that now. So, but hey, God love those coaches that in today's world that have to deal with that and still make good on it. So,
Yeah, it seems like that development piece has kind of been lost now, where you're recruiting through the portal, and then guys are leaving if they're not playing, and the development over a 4-year stretch doesn't happen quite as often. Right. I wanted to ask about the collaborative process for scouts. So you're with the Detroit Tigers organization. It sounds like in the fall you're getting out, you're seeing as many players as you can. You're kind of adding to your list of guys that you want to check out in the spring, during the college baseball season. When you get a chance, you get out to high school and prep games, when it's not, midweek college baseball, or on the weekends when you're probably scouting the most for college baseball. So then at the end, you kind of put your reports together, and you have your guys that you love. And then you've got regional scouts from all over the country coming together to figure out how you're going to approach the draft. Right. Do you have any stories where you're like banging on the table for a guy and you're trying to convince everybody to take him, or guys you missed out on that you loved, or anything like that?
No, I got 100 of them. I mean, when you do this for 25 years, there's always a guy or two every year that you always have the guys that you miss. And those are the ones that bother you the most. It's not always the ones that you get that go to the big leagues. Yeah, you kind of stick your chest out and say, yeah, I stuck my neck out for that guy. But it always seems it's the ones that bother you the most are the ones that you miss. And they stick with you for years. And I can go back to Rajai Davis. He's my big one. I mean, the guy played for 19 years, maybe. And God love him. He went to UConn Avery Point. Okay. And he was a basketball player at UConn Avery Point, and an exceptional athlete. When I was a young scout with Cleveland, and Rajai was basically joining the baseball season during, right after his basketball would finish, and he was basically learning on the job. And unfortunately, I wasn't smart enough to figure that out, that, hey, he's going to be a little rough to be in the beginning, because I always knew he could run and I always knew he could defend, but the swing didn't work. at that point. And I just, you gotta make a decision. And I made a decision that this isn't going to work. Well, he ends up going in the 39th round to the Pittsburgh Pirates. Charlie Sullivan, who was the area guy at that time, took a flyer on him. Roger Bidwell, who was the coach at UConn Avery Point at that time, he flat out told us, don't give up on this guy. He's athletic and he's smart and he'll figure it out. Well, I wasn't smart enough to figure out that he would figure it out. And I let him go. And next thing you know, he gets drafted in the 39th round, and he played for 19 years and was almost a World Series, World Series hero with the home run against the Cubs. And if the rain doesn't come, they probably win that series. So that one sticks with me. There's a few that I banged the table that I'm very proud of. Brad Brock pitched for 15 years, was an all-star one year. I got him in the 42nd round back when we had 50 rounds. For $1,000. And that was a player I had to bang the table had to stand up 4 different times to tell my people, you need to take this guy. And they finally took him just to shut me up. And next thing you know, he passes everybody up and goes, puts up cartoon type numbers and goes to the big leagues and pitches for 15 years. Those are the ones you're extremely proud of. Jason Foley, who's with us right now in our bullpen, was a non-drafted free agent. And he went through a lot of adversity. It's when he came out of Sacred Heart, and I saw him pitch in the summer and at Mystic in the NECBL. Took a chance on him, and he's figured it out. And now he's in the big leagues as one of our best leverage closers, our best leverage pitchers in the bullpen. So we all have stories like that make you proud, keeps us doing what we do. And gives us hope every time we go out and see these guys in New England, because you just never know. You just never know when they're all of a sudden the light's going to turn on and they figure it out. And you do the best you can to assess their tools, and you stick your neck out and you believe in them, and you roll the dice sometimes. And if you do it well enough over a long period of time, you end up fooling them every year, like I do, and keeping a job. So, and there's others, but those 2 come to mind right now. Tyler Madison, who pitched at Bryant, he's on our 40 man, and he's on the verge of one call from the big leagues right now. I'm very proud of what he's done because he's worked through a Tommy John, and right now he is throwing the heck out of the ball in camp. Those kind of guys, that's what we live for. Those stories, those guys, taking them out of, a young college player or high school player. And then all of a sudden, 5 years later, you see him playing on TV and you can say, hey, I stood up for that guy. And that's why we do it. That's why scouts do it. So.
Yeah, it sounds like those late round guys are more the ones that you take the most pride in. The guys who got drafted. Now there's only 20 rounds, but the guys that were in the 40s or the 30s. What about so what would be the process? The last few years, I guess we've had some guys go pretty high in first, second round, like the Frank Mazzucatos and the Thomas White and Alex Clemmie and Sal Frelick and all those guys. So what happens when you love one of those guys, but you're not even sure if you're going to get the chance to draft that? They might be gone in the first round before you're even on the board, or like how much more do you have to sell it when you're saying, hey, I think we should use a first round pick on this guy?
Well, first of all, it's a credit to those guys for helping to make our area important again. Used to, it was very hard to get those guys, unless you were just an elite player. Let's be honest, there's a lot of bosses and a lot of cross-checkers that don't like to come to the Northeast in March when it's freezing cold and they're standing in the snow. And, and so it was really hard at one point for guys to really, I don't think they had a really good feel for the area. With the success of some of those players that you just mentioned, and there's a lot more than that, the George Springers of the world, the Nick Ahmeds of the world, like you said, the Thomas Whites and all those guys. Guess what? Our area is relevant, and it's become pretty darn relevant because I think our across baseball, people have figured out that, there's pretty darn good players up there. We just got to go up there and scout them. And I think now they're getting the attention they deserve. I think they're getting what they're due. Programs like we just talked about, UConn and Northeastern and Bryant and UMaine, and I mean, you go down the list, Boston College, Fairfield, all those, they're putting a good product out there. And our people now across baseball are now going in to see those players. And half the battle is for the good players is getting them seen. And so they're getting seen, and they're producing while they're being seen. I think now you combine the things we mentioned earlier, the work ethic, the blue collar lunch pail. We in the pro game, we don't want a finished product. We want a guy with a high ceiling. Our guys tend to have high ceilings. So if you've got tools and you've got all those things, and now it doesn't matter where the players come from. They come from everywhere. They come from Maine, they come from California, they come from Texas, they come from Rhode Island. So it's just a matter of getting them seen on a regular basis now, which is happening. So that's why you're starting to see first rounders, second rounders out of the Northeast. There's now a belief in our players, which is great. It makes our jobs relevant. It makes what we do important every day. And I think that's any area scout in our area. That's all they want, is to be able to go out and know that their job matters every day when they're going to go see a kid at UMass or a kid at Maine or a kid at UConn. I mean, that's all we want, is the chance. And we're starting to get the chance now. We've just got to do a good job of assessing them, selling them, and getting our people to believe in them.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, I know today's a travel day for you. Do you have time to do our 3 up, 3 down segment? This is our producer, David Yaz, is going to take over, and then it could be trivia. We never know what he's going to come up with, but do you mind hanging in for that?
No problem. Go ahead.
All right, here's our producer, David Yaz.
All right, Dan, let's do that 3 up, 3 down thing.
3 up, 3 down.
3 up, 3 down is when I lob 3. It's kind of like soft toss. You guys remember soft toss, right? Of course.
A lot of it.
Yeah, I went to the Doyle Brothers baseball camp in Florida when I was a young man. A lot of soft toss. Well, here's your soft tosses for today. 3 questions, and they all begin with, would you rather be this baseball personality or that personality? So we asked you to imagine a fantasy-like scenario where you just step into the shoes of this person and you have their career. You'll understand in a moment. And the first question is, would you rather be Barry Bonds or Barry Zito? So would you rather have had the career of Barry Bonds or Barry Zito? Now, we know Barry Bonds, of course, is the home run king, but he's been followed by controversy. We don't need to go into that. We know what that's all about. And never won a World Series. Barry Zito, Cy Young winner and World Series winner. Jim, we will let you go first since you're the guest. Would you rather have been Barry Bonds or Barry Zito?
Wow. Well, I don't think either one of them are going to be hurting for any type of job later on. So, I mean, I was a position player, so you would think I would say Barry Bonds, because I certainly had no power. I had no power when I played, so it's hard for me to be him. I think I probably would have been closer to being a Barry Zito. I think at this point I'd have to say Barry Zito, because when it's time for us to ride off into the sunset, I think he's going to have an easier time of riding off into the sunset.
That's a good point.
Barry, listen, unbelievable. Was the best hitter in a period of time there in baseball. Probably certainly belongs in the Hall of Fame. But I think there comes a time when we have to enjoy life later on. And I think Barry Zito is going to have an easier time with that. So I would say Barry Zito.
It's a good way of looking at it. Yeah. Barry Zito kind of quietly did his job, and kind of snubbed in the movie Moneyball. They spent a lot of time on, Jeremy Giambi without spending time on Barry Zito, who was.
Well, we all know that movie was, and I know a lot of those people that that were played in that movie, and because I worked with a lot of them, but and so it was Hollywooded up, if you want to put it that way.
Absolutely.
So.
By the way, in 2004, Barry Bonds walked 232 times. 232 bases on balls. No one's even come close to that. All right, Dan, it is your turn. Would you rather have been Barry Bonds or Barry Zito?
Yeah, no, I love that Oakland A's staff. It was like Tim Hudson, Mark Mulder, Zito. That was I love that Oakland A's team. I can't imagine stepping into a big league, batter's box, hitting 73 home runs. Like that level of talent is just amazing. And like no one was even pitching to him back then. He would see like one pitch a game and he'd hit it for a home run.
He'd hit for a home run.
Yeah, so I would love to have that talent, but I do agree with Jim that if the goal in life is to enjoy it and be fulfilled, Barry Bonds just never seemed happy. Even when he was hitting 73 home runs, he'd stand in front of his locker in the clubhouse and tell the media how they were just screwing him, and he was not happy. So I'm going to side with Jim and say I want to be happy like Barry Zito.
I think
we do get older, and there is a time when we need to kind of drift off into the sunset, and that's going to be harder for Barry Bonds, I think, in my opinion, than it is for Zito. So
yeah.
As a younger man, I might have said Barry Bonds, but I'm 60 years old, going on 61. I'm about, I'm at that point, the Barry Zito point. So.
All right, next question, Dan. You can start with this one. Would you rather have had the career of Mike Trout or Mike Timlin? Now, of course, Mike Trout's career continues to this day, but he not presumably, I don't think anyone would argue he's a Hall of Fame player. And of course, famously, I think has only played in the postseason once, maybe, or 0 times. Anyway, he certainly hasn't had a whiff of the World Series. Now, Mike Timlin was never the best pitcher on his staff, but won 4 World Series, I believe, 2 with the Blue Jays and 2 with the Red Sox, and always a reliable role player, middle reliever type, quality guy, clubhouse guy, apparently. Dan, which way you going, Mike Trout or Mike Timlin?
Jeez, I didn't realize Timlin won 4. I would go Trout, best player in baseball for a stretch. That was legendary Philadelphia Eagles fan, and I also
that's why you like him.
But no, he's great, 5-tool player, and he actually doesn't seem all that bothered by the fact that he hasn't had a huge playoff, hasn't had a huge career in the playoffs, or hasn't had the opportunity to have that career. Didn't he re-sign? I thought he re-signed with the Angels when he had a chance to possibly explore free agency. So I think if we're looking at the happiness scale, I think he's a pretty happy guy, even though he's not making it to the World Series every year.
All right. Fair enough. Jim, your thoughts, Mike Timlin or Mike Trout?
Agree 100% with Dan. I would first of all, knowing Mike Trout very well and knowing who he is, he's the same guy off the field as he is on the field, or on the field as he is off the field. He's the simple kid, from Millville, New Jersey. We all scouted him when he was in high school. We actually had him on area code team. And he's the same guy. He's the same simple guy, married his high school sweetheart. Unbelievable player. As Dan said, one of the best player, probably the best player in baseball for an extended period of time. Now, it's unfortunate with his injuries and the fact that he has not got a chance to really play in the postseason. That's a shame, and it's really kind of cheating baseball fans, because we would love to see that guy play in a World Series and for all the marbles. To have his tools, to have his athletic ability, gosh, I would love to be Mike Trout.
All right. Well, many of us would. Yes. He's 33. He's still got a lot of gas in the tank. So hopefully he'll make it to a World Series at some point in the future. All right. Final question for a 3 up, 3 down. I got the most creative with this one, probably. Would you rather be or have the career of Jim Thome or Jim Bouton? Now, Jim Bouton, of course, no longer with us, but Jim. Let's start with Jim Thome, of course. In recent years, elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame. 612 home runs. He never won a World Series. Played in one, I believe, 5-time All-Star. Jim Bouton, of course, one of baseball's most historical, colorful figures. He was a 20-game winner. He did win a World Series ring with the Yankees. Pitched in 3 World Series. But best known as the author of Ball 4, controversial guy. He was also an actor, activist, sportscaster, and one of the creators of Big League Chew, which I just learned today. So, Jim, if you'll indulge me with that weird question, Jim Thome or Jim Bouton?
Great question. And I tell you what, my dad actually went to high school with Jim Bouton.
Really?
In Chicago, in the Chicago, he's from the Chicago area. And my dad used to tell me stories about Jim Bouton. and he was a colorful figure. As far as the choice, I actually working for Cleveland. Jim Thome was part of the Indians, now the Guardians, when I was with the Indians, and I got to know Jim a little bit because he's just that simple farm boy from Peoria, Illinois. And Jim and I got along really, really well. And if I had to pick between the two, I'd say Thome, just simply for who he is. Quick story, he was being gifted a car of his choice from the local Cleveland dealer. And they said, what do you want? And they were throwing all these expensive cars at him. And he said, my wife needs a pickup truck. You got a pickup truck? He chose a pickup truck. That's why I love Jim Thome, the simplicity of it all. He is who he is. And that's all we want to be, is just be who we are. So I would probably pick Jim Thome.
Great choice and great reasoning. Dan, your thoughts?
I will also go Jim Thome. I know of him a lot more than I do Jim Bouton, but Jim Thome, everybody will always remember him as a Cleveland Indian, I guess, back then. But when he signed with the Phillies, like, they had just gotten the new ballpark, Citizens Bank Park, and the Phillies just had a terrible stretch in like the 90s and early 2000s where, they were in last place every year. And when they signed him, that really like changed everything in Philadelphia. It was like, hey, we're going to start spending money. This is going to put us on the map. Everybody loved him. He produced for them well. And then they kind of turned it around right after they signed him and ended up winning a World Series, not with him, but a few years later. And so he really changed the complexion of that franchise. And I'm a Phillies fan, so I'll always be appreciative of that. So I'm going to go Jim Thome.
Well, excellent choice, excellent reasoning from both of you. One final note on Jim Bouton. He popped up in a documentary which was released in recent years on Netflix called The Battered Bastards of Baseball. You familiar, Dan?
No.
You're familiar, Jim?
I am.
Yeah.
I actually have seen that.
Yeah, about the Portland. They were the Portland Beavers. I think they became the Portland Mavericks, and it was kind of a remnant of the old days of independent baseball. The last remaining independently owned minor league baseball team started by Bing Russell, who was an actor and father of Kurt Russell, who was on the team. Kurt Russell and Jim Bouton, after having been blackballed by baseball for exposing all the secrets in Ball 4. Took a chance and signed with the Mavericks in Portland and played as kind of getting on there in years, but he loved baseball so much. So, a great, interesting look at minor league baseball in that doc. Am I right, Jim?
That is correct. Yeah, they actually outdrew everybody in baseball, as an independent team. Yeah. Bing Russell was a Western cowboy movie star.
Sure.
And so he was in a lot of those Westerns, but back in the day. And then of course, Kevin, his son, Kurt played for them for a short while before he really, got into the acting thing. So yeah, it's an interesting thing. And I encourage anybody who loves baseball to watch that, pick that up on Netflix or whatever, and watch that. It's pretty cool.
There you go. Excellent. All right. So see, listeners, you got a little bit of everything today. And thank you. Back to you, Dan, to wrap things up.
All right. Thanks to Jim Bretz for joining us on the Base Path podcast. Subscribe to the podcast on your preferred platform. Thanks to our producer, David Yaz. The Base Path podcast is a Siemens Media production.